So, speaking of your research, you worked a lot on e-commerce, urban congestion, and last mile delivery. So, at the MIT Intelligent Logistics Systems Lab, your research with Amazon focused on how e-commerce affects traffic congestion across three major US cities. So, what surprised you most about how deliveries are reshaping city traffic?
Yeah. So this was a project that we did a few years ago. And kind of the whole purpose of it was to figure out um, how does e-commerce impact traffic congestion in different cities. And so we created a whole big citywide simulation model to kind of understand what that looks like. I think kind of the biggest surprise for me from that came from the whole research process of collecting, okay, what have other people done in this field to try to understand how, delivery vans, delivery trucks impact traffic and mobility for everybody else. And I think kind of what struck me is that there is like research out there, kind of, for example, on like how does e-commerce and delivery vans impact parking for other people? Because, delivery vans park and then the driver goes out and delivers packages and um how do delivery vans impact like safety for bicyclists, for example, if they're kind of double parking on streets. But all a lot of the evidence that we have on these impacts on those and on congestion are like very city specific and kind of the results of individual case studies. And so there's yet to like be greater kind of more generalizable findings that can come from this. Um, and I think all these kinds of questions are important to answer because, if you want to make good public policy, if you work in city government, if you want to say something like, okay, I want to limit this street um, to not allow delivery vehicle parking, or I want to make this zone in my city only for like zero emissions vehicles. You want to be able to have an understanding of how that's going to impact deliveries and how that's going to impact mobility for everybody else. So you want to kind of go into those decisions from an informed standpoint. But there's some kind of case studies that are different cities are doing to just to kind of play around with what might happen. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see in the next like 10 or so years um, if we get more data and kind of understanding. But the hard part is that e-commerce is evolving so quickly that it can be hard for cities to keep up.
Well, one of your key findings is that it's not just delivery vans, but changes in consumer shopping behavior that drive congestion outcomes. So, can you help unpack that insight a bit?
Yeah, yeah. So, obviously what we know for sure is that more people buying like Amazon packages means more delivery vans on the road. But what can be a little hard to parse out is how it's kind of the relationship between like online shopping and in-store shopping. So because people are shopping more online, does that mean they're shopping in stores less or more or, by different travel modes or what's that relationship? So I think some studies have found that there's a kind of a substitutive relationship, meaning that if you shop more online, then you shop less in a store. And like I think that's true for me because I go on Amazon and I buy like laundry detergent and bags of rice and like stuff that's really heavy that I don't want to have to buy from the grocery store and walk home with. So I think, at least for me, it means I go to the store less. But it might also be that people um, are buying things like from Amazon or other services that they wouldn't have otherwise bought. Um, so we're still kind of, again, parsing out what more e-commerce traffic means for other kinds of trips. And so what we did in the study is we assumed several different kinds of relationships. So we said, okay, if the relationship is substitutive of this degree, kind of on average, then how does that impact travel? Or if it's complementary, then how does that impact travel? Just so we can kind of like get a little bit of a gauge. But Again, I think like more research is coming out all the time about people's shopping behavior. Yeah.
Well, I think Professor Zhao once had a quote that always inspired me, like transportation is half engineering and also half human behavior. So you get to understand both, the technology and the last mile routing, but you can also understand, the human behavior and think
Yeah.
other people's shoes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, every time you make a travel decision, like there's so much logic that goes into that. And
Yeah.
some of that is kind of universal, some of that is person specific. And so, yeah, I think that's so interesting to try to figure out why do people travel how they do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you also contributed to the Amazon Last Mile Routing Research Challenge, which we talked about a bit when we were working together.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you helped publish its data set, which is incredible. So, what did the data reveal about real-world delivery patterns that traditional routing algorithms tend to miss?
Yeah. So this was kind of it was a routing competition that Amazon did in partnership with MIT to try to figure out how we can add more realism into vehicle routes that service providers like Amazon give to their drivers to follow. Um, and so part of that was this whole data set of routes that like experienced Amazon drivers had driven. There was something like 10,000 of them. And so it's been super cool to see other authors use that data set in their own research. But I think something you can see in that data is that often the routes that these drivers take from customer to customer are a little bit different than what you might get if you just solved a kind of an optimization problem that gives you the minimum travel time between all these locations that you have to visit. So kind of as an example, it like if you've ever used Google Maps or Apple Maps and you're like driving around in a city, most of what those algorithms are doing is finding the least time route from your origin to your destination. But it might have you do something crazy like try to take a left turn across 4 lanes of traffic when there's no protected left turn, and you're just kind of sitting there and waiting, and the cars behind you are honking, and that's not a very pleasant experience. So, so a lot of what these drivers will do is because they know the areas and the neighborhoods that they serve so well, is they'll have some kind of tacit knowledge already about what order should I visit these customers in. So they might do their route so that they don't have to take that left turn, for example. So I think one big push in this vehicle routing literature, kind of academic spaces, how do we add more of this realism into our routing algorithms so that we're kind of better approximating what these seasoned delivery drivers do, for example.
That's another aspect of human behavior, both on the consumer side, but also the
Mhm.
delivery driver side. So your work does a lot of blending between network optimization with also human-centered consideration. So how do you navigate the trade-off between maximizing efficiency and also addressing fairness and equity in transportation?
Yeah. So I think I'm gonna like talk about this from a kind of big T transportation perspective because I think this is a consideration that's true just across every mode and kind of transportation problem. I think one of the keys in balancing them is knowing what a model can give you and what a model cannot give you. So in my work, I do a lot of kind of optimization modeling where you put in a set of constraints and then you ask it to, for example, minimize the cost of a network or maximize the efficiency of a network in some way. And so it's very much about kind of a cost focused approach. Um, and so you can add considerations of like equity and fairness into those models. So maybe you say something like, I want to make sure that um, the mobility of low income people isn't disadvantaged, for example. Um, but I think And that there are some kind of sophisticated ways that you can add those things to your models. But I think ultimately, whatever considerations you can add are kind of, they're still coming from your own brain. So they're going to reflect your own biases and assumptions as a modeler. So I think the best thing you can do is kind of when you're making a decision is talking to the people who that decision will affect. And so trying to better understand what their needs and priorities are, because they might differ from your assumptions of what they are. So kind of treating like mathematical models as a tool, a really valuable tool, but still just as a way to help you get to a solution, but maybe not the final solution itself.
It's like math is like a means to an end, but you still have to
Yeah.
do some work in between.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think whenever you're like using math, there's a lot of decisions that go into what math you use. So
Yeah,
trying to be really cognizant of how you're modeling something and maybe what you're leaving out in the modeling process too.
got it. Well, from your perspective, what's the hardest problem in last mile delivery today? It's a big
That's a good
question.
question. Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is kind of balancing the convenience we get with the some of the workforce considerations. So really big focus is on convenience and getting goods with shorter and shorter lead times. So I think it was like 2005 that Amazon unveiled 2-day shipping, and that was a huge deal back then. But since then, they've come out with 1-day shipping for certain products and then same-day shipping. There's Amazon Fresh, and you can get groceries, like you can get prescription medications. And so with this, like this expansion of scope, and this kind of these reductions of lead times, so you can get your goods faster and faster, that puts a whole lot of pressure on kind of time and making sure processes work as quickly as possible. So I think what's important when we think about convenience is also thinking about the people who are doing that really hard work, like the delivery drivers who are maybe doing 10 to 12-hour routes every day and lifting like 200 packages from their delivery van to everybody's doorstep. Or like the people who work in the warehouse who are on their feet for so like 10 hours a day. So I think the real challenge is how we kind of make sure we're protecting people's health and well-being and still trying to find ways to have this convenience.
As always, I think the main take is like there's a lot of human behavior and human
Exactly. Yeah.
considerations that really need to go into this.